And so without further ado, please help me welcome our speaker, who is a project management that's what it was, technical program manager at the Big G, Google, Ms. Joedian Reid. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for being here after what I hope was a good lunch. So today my talk will be on transparency, inspection, and adaptation, strategies for building trust on agile teams. I'm going to assume you're here either because you're having some dysfunction on your agile team, or you think this is an agile talk, or you're having dysfunction on your team, whether or not you are using agile. So in the first part, I'm going to briefly, and I mean briefly, touch on agile. Then in the second part, I'm going to go into transparency, inspection, and adaptation a bit more. I'm going to show you how to identify dysfunction on your team, how to tell that this dysfunction is caused by a lack of trust. Then I'm going to give you some strategies to fix this dysfunction using transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And then I'm going to show you how to tell whether or not the tips I've given you, whether or not they have worked. Forgot my clicker here. So many years ago, I worked on this particular software. I worked on it for an entire year, and this software was never launched, right? So we worked on it for an entire year. We coded, it was tested, it wasn't launched. In this case, the requirements were written like 2 years before. They went, they had meetings, they wrote down the requirements, they had the sign off, then we started to build, we tested, we were like, yay, it's over. And then it never launched. The government changed, management changed, and there was just no need for this software anymore. I would like to think if we were using Agile, we would have some parts of that software in production even today. Or at least we would have had the opportunity to really release a reporting function, a cashiering function, a management portion, some part, and we would have been able to get feedback from those small portions and use that to improve the software, or to build exactly what the users wanted. And in the end, we would have released something. So of course, that was waterfall. And after that, I started to use Agile. Our team started to implement Agile. And we started to build in a wholly different way. So when I see Agile, what I think about is that we're building in increments. We're releasing these increments. We're giving them to the customer. We're getting feedback from the customer, and we're using that feedback to keep building. That is what Agile means for me. Of course, Agile, you hear the word Agile, you think a lot of things. People equate Agile to Scrum. It is not. When you hear people complaining about the dreaded DSU and why do I have to get up in the morning at 8 a.m., they're often talking about Scrum. But you also have XP, you have Scrumban, you have SAVE. There are so many other implementations. Agile is really about how you build, getting that feedback, and using that feedback. When I was looking at definitions, I saw this one by Alan. I hope he's not here today. Alan, sorry. He says there's no such thing as the Agile methodology. At least there is no one methodology. It's about delivering software quickly to get feedback and acting on that feedback. And I agree. I totally agree. Because if you're not building and you're not releasing, your team is going to be frustrated, right? You're going to be like me, where you have the requirements written for 2 years. You sit and you write this software, you have it tested, and you feel so proud, and then it never, ever gets released. But there are issues, of course, right? There are issues with the team losing its trust, not building the right thing. And I think some of those issues can be solved, right, with transparency, inspection, and adaptation. How many people in this room has heard of Scrum? Okay. How many persons have used Scrum on their teams? Perfect. This is not a Scrum talk. It's not about Scrum. However, if you have used Scrum, you would have seen these words before, because these 3 words are the pillars of Scrum. And I've used Scrum the most. I actually was a Scrum Master in one of my roles before. These 3 words as they represent in Scrum as the pillars, they really resonated with me because I looked at them and I thought, when we use transparency, when we use inspection, when we use adaptation, we are building trust and we're building psychological safety on the team. And I think we can use that whether or not we're using Agile, whether or not we're using Scrum. And I'm going to show you exactly how. In Scrum, the diagram looks something like this, right? There's transparency, there's inspection, there's adaptation, and they're the pillars, they're holding up Scrum. I've revamped them just a little bit. I'm thinking transparency, inspection, and adaptation, they're really the pillars of trust on an Agile team or any other team you're working on. And the basis of this is psychological safety. Because without trust, there's no psychological safety. And without psychological safety, there is no trust. Right? Without trust, there's no psychological safety. And without psychological safety, there is no trust. So transparency. When you think of transparency, you're saying every single person on the team understands where we are as a project. You're understanding what are the problems that we're having, what are the successes, where our wins are, the help that is needed. Everyone is on the same page. In Scrum, this is implemented via the DSUs and via the demos, right? People are saying, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'll work on next. This is what our blockers are. But you don't have to be using Scrum or Agile. It is important that teams are transparent, though, because without transparency, you're going to have problems. Without transparency, you're going to have chaos. Here, the engineer is saying, I don't know when I'll be done, The TPM, the Scrum Master, is like, hey, give me a timeline. And of course, people are going to get frustrated by that. Upper management is saying, are we going to launch on time? And the customer is frustrated. Am I going to get this feature? No one knows what is happening without transparency. No one knows, right? So when there is such chaos, there is no transparency. What does this look like for the team? It looks like this. And as we go through these slides, you're going to notice that we're going to be moving from an area of low trust on your team to an area of high trust, right? When there's no transparency, it looks like this. Team members are fearful and distrustful of each other. They're hiding info on their blockers. They know they're blocked. They're not letting you know until Friday at 6 p.m. after you've logged off. They're giving fake timelines or they're downplaying their capabilities because they do not want to communicate that, hey, I'm having a challenge with this part, or I'm having a challenge and I need help, right? They're fearful. This is because the team is just not transparent. And that's not a good thing. We can fix this though. You want to ensure that you're communicating expectations clearly and early during the onboarding or reboarding process. What this means is that if you're having a new member join your team or your org, it could be a big org, a small org, or you're in the stock and you're like, that sounds like the problems we are having, and I want to re-onboard people to these practices, right? You go back and you set those expectations. You're saying, I want us to be a bit more transparent because I was told that transparency builds trust, right? And then you want to make sure that sharing is a part of the culture of the organization. Everyone is sharing. You're hearing information in the town halls. You're hearing information from your managers. You're sharing information upwards. You want to announce delays early. Anything that's happening that could affect the timeline on the project, no one is bothering you when they say, hey, is it done yet? Right? You want to announce because this is how we are transparent, and we're transparent with the people who we work with because we care about the outcomes of what we're delivering. You also want to tell the right stakeholders and tell them the relevant information too, right? You tell your lead, or you tell your TPM or the directors or your fellow engineers, etc. Tell the right stakeholders. And in the case there is, let's say you have to report to the VP or the directors, you don't want all your engineers to be communicating that out, right? You appoint a stakeholder, right, to do that communication so that information gets shared. You won't be able to say then, oh, sorry, I thought X did that, because you have a stakeholder, right? Transparency is not about micromanagement. With micromanagement, you usually have some lead or some hierarchy, and there's someone overly focused on what you're doing. Transparency is about everyone on the team. You're looking at yourself as partners, and you're sharing that information to your partners, right? And when someone asks you something, they're your partners, not someone trying to focus on every little bit of your work. Team health. When the team is transparent, you'll notice information is flowing. You're asking, hey, when are we going to be ready? And someone else can say, hey, I heard that we're going to be ready on Monday, because everyone understands where you're at. Information is relevant, it is timely. Your expectations are adjusted strategically and not chaotically, which means on Friday evening, you're not saying, oh, we missed it, let's do it on Monday. And Monday, you're saying, oh, we missed it, let's do it on Tuesday. You have the information at hand to say, okay, we're going to try for next week. We're going to try for the 15th. And this happens when everyone is transparent. And of course, there's no loss of trust. Transparency is a currency of trust, right? The more transparent you are, right, the more trust you get, as I mentioned before. And transparency, it builds and it builds and it builds. Inspection. Inspection in Scrum would happen with your demos or sometimes with your retros, where you go and you look at your work and you say, is this what I plan to build? Whether or not you're using Agile, inspection should be happening, and this helps build team trust. Why? Because everyone on the team should be open to inspection. This means the work that you're doing, you should be open to someone else looking in and say, hey, what are you working on? Oh, okay, let's validate this against requirements. Is this really what we're supposed to be build? Is this what the customer actually expects? So this is what inspection is, us looking in on our work, looking in on what we're delivering and saying, hey, this is really what should be going out to our customers. Without inspection, you're going to have bugs. And every solution, every software has bugs. So it's not solely about the fact that we have bugs, but it's the type of bugs. Are there things that we could have caught way, way earlier by just looking in on our code or on our solutions and looking in on ourselves? And of course, inspection, it doesn't have to be in a meeting. It can be async, right? So it's not about, say, hey, let's have another meeting, or might as well we do Scrum, or might as well we do something else. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we're able to inspect and look in on the work that we're doing. When you don't have inspection, when your team is close to inspection, you're going to notice that your team members are fearful and they're distrustful of each other. They don't want anyone looking at their code or even commenting on it. Inspection will then be seen as a sign of incompetence. If someone says, hey, can I do a code review with you? You're like, why me, right? Only junior or new team members have their work reviewed. That's not fair. Everyone can make mistakes. So if you want to be, if you're close to inspection, you're only looking at juniors. And as I said, that's not fair. And when you're close to inspection, the inspection is random and is used as a tool to intimidate. So someone missed their deadline, someone did something, put a bug into production, you're saying, oh, let's inspect that person. But as I said, everyone can make mistakes. So how do we fix that? You want to identify gaps that can be fixed, and you want to create processes that are proportional to the risk. So it's not about a spelling error on the UI, you're talking about outages, etc., right? So we want to say, okay, we want to start inspecting before every feature go out, every big feature that affects this part of our API, etc. And you want to create some inspection process that is proportional. You want to empower all the right stakeholders, which is probably everyone in the team, because everyone has some value that they can add. And you want to be very, very consistent. As I said, not just the juniors, not just the newbies. You want to be consistent. Everyone, the leads, every single person should be open to having their work looked at. You want it to be transparent. You want to have inspection. And how will you know whether or not it is working? Well, if there's a scheduled time for inspection, for example, at the end of every feature or right before release, everyone is going to know that. You're going to also bring the right persons on board, right? You're going to say, hey, do we need to have QA? Do we need to have the person who wrote this bit of the code? Are we having, the Scrum Master or the TPMs, if you have one? Do we need the director for whatever reason. Do we need to have customers present? You're bringing everyone on board that you need to have this inspection. And you'll also notice that knowledge will be shared. As you inspect, as you look at your work, and you say, compare them to what the requirements are or what the user needs are, people are going to see that, right? Whether they're junior engineers or the senior engineers or the EMs or whatever role, right? They're going to look and they're going to be like, oh, I learned something new, right? They're going to learn. And if it's something happening among peers, for example, in a small team, they're going to then learn from each other. In the case, for example, as code reviews. So this is what it will look like if we are now in a high trust environment. Trust but verify. This saying, it said, Ronald Reagan said it, I'm not sure, so, Indeed, you want to make sure that what you are releasing, whatever solution it is, you're verifying it. You're verifying it. I once crashed an application because I started writing the commit, then I put a semicolon in the wrong place and pushed the commit. I didn't even notice that. I didn't notice until it crashed. So you want to verify. And a good way to have verification is to inspect your process and inspect your work. And last but not least, adaptation. You cannot fix what you don't inspect, right? And you're missing out on customers. You're missing out on market share if you're not adapting. Think TikTok, Instagram, Reels, Facebook. I don't know what Facebook calls it. Is it Reels too, or WhatsApp, Snaps, or etc.? If you're not adapting, you're missing out. And your team needs to adapt to the new persons that they're bringing in, to the requirements that the users have, to the market, etc. Adaptation needs to happen. Even in the in terms of the software that we're releasing or the solution we're releasing, we have to adapt to maintain the satisfaction of the team and of our customers. If we're not adapting, everyone is going to be confused. Your users are going to be like, this is not what I asked for. Or why are you releasing video calls in Twitter at this time, right? Your users are going to be totally confused. Your developers are also going to be confused because they're thinking, why is no one using this thing that I released, right? Because they release it, but no one is using it. What is happening? You're not listening to your market. You're not adapting. When a team is not adapting, they're close to adaptation, it looks a little bit like this. Team members are defensive about the quantity of the work that they do. Quantity, not the quality. Because they're saying, I'm doing so much, right? It may not be the right thing, but I'm doing so much. So, I must be a good engineer or whatever, right? Releases are now based on features and not the needs of the market. So I created this cool feature to, create halos or something over your photo when you hold up your camera. Something else is out in the market. That's not what our users need. But we release it anyway, instead of just looking at, do our users find this valuable now in the market? User feedback is ignored, and there's no insight into business needs, right? So this is what happens when a team is totally closed to adaptation. Low trust. How do we get into high trust? We can fix these issues simply by keeping an eye on the client's needs and comparing that to our current work. In Agile, there's no problem with throwing away work, or stashing it or putting it aside. It's not lost. It's not like the year I wasted writing that application that never got into production. If you keep an eye on your client's needs and you adapt, then you're now open to adaptation. Have a good CI/CD rollback and versioning process so you can adapt to the needs of the market. You also want to ensure that all the team members understand the higher goals of the team, the company, and the product, which means even if small things change, like the requirements, they already know the goals of the client base, the goals of the company, the goals of the team. And they can adapt. And they'll also be open to adapting because they know the work that they're doing right now may not be as valuable. And, they're okay just stashing it for a while. On a team that's adaptable or open to adaptation, you're going to notice that the team is delivering value to clients, not just features. You'll also notice that the market and users are considered with every single release, right? Things change at the drop of a hat, so you have to be able to adapt. The users have a way to provide feedback. So you have a feedback form, or you have user sessions that people go out. You have to get your feedback if you're trying to build in an agile manner or in a way where you are truly catering to the needs of the users. Also, the dev team has transparency into user feedback. It doesn't have to be that the team goes and read everything that they hear, right? You have this long list. I tried that once. It's super hard. You have 1,000 comments with stars. No. They can have a compiled version with the important things, the things that are pain points, etc. But the team that's doing the work, I put dev team here because, we're a lot of us are in the software field. But the team that's doing the work should have an eye into the user feedback. Be water, my friend. I saw this and I thought it was pretty cool. Basically, adapt to whatever container you're in. As an engineering team, if you are adaptable, you should be open to the changes in the business, in the market, in your team, etc., right? Nothing is personal. You worked on this feature for an entire year or 3 months. It's no longer what the client needs. You may have to put it aside. You have to be adaptable. The company also has to be adaptable. It has to adapt to the needs of the clients. It's as simple as that. So, the TLDR. Transparent teams communicate well. There are less surprises and blame, right? Because surprises and blame, it erodes the trust of your team. And in the end, people will not want to work with each other. You don't want to have that. That's a low trust environment. Teams open to inspection, they check their own work and validate all assumptions. There are less defects, right? And I should have put in bracket, less important defects. Defects that are going to affect the morale of the team or the user base. Teams that are open to adaptation ship what the users want and need and validate that through feedback. No one wants to build something that the users don't want. Not one of us want to ship something. It's like putting up a lemonade stand, right? And no one comes to buy your lemonade. No one wants to do that. This really, really affects morale. And final slide, thank you. Thank you for coming out. Thanks for coming to my talk. Feel free to scan the QR code and add me on LinkedIn. All right, thank you and have a great afternoon.